My ex killed me in his short story, and now I'm the villain in my own life. Okay, he killed me. No, not literally, but he might as well have. He wrote me into his precious little short story, made me this one-dimensional, nagging bitch, and then had me die in the most pathetic, humiliating way imaginable. It was his literary middle finger, served cold. And look, I know my humor can be sharp, I get it. But that was our thing, you know? I'm the practical one, he's the dreamer. I poke, he broods. It's the dance we've been doing for 5 years. Now he's just gone, vanished, blocked me everywhere and left this story as his final word. Our friends are sending these cautious, "You okay?" texts, but I know what they're really asking. They've read it. They see me as the monster he painted. So I'm the bad guy now because his little hobby finally paid off and he couldn't handle a few jokes. Seriously, can you really blame me for all of this? I'm a VP at a pretty competitive financial firm. My days are a blur of high-stakes conference calls, risk assessments, and translating chaotic market data into cold, hard profit. I live by the mantra, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. It's how I got to where I am before 30. Isaac, well, Isaac lives in a world of metaphors and tortured protagonists. He's a writer, and a brilliant one, I'll admit, even if I don't always get his obsession with, like, the existential dread of a wilting houseplant or whatever. When we first met, that contrast was electric. He was my escape from the concrete jungle of Wall Street. I loved his passion, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about sentence structure. I thought it was adorable. So about a year in, I made him a deal. I remember the night perfectly. He'd just gotten home, smelling of burnt coffee and defeat after a double shift at some soulless cafe. I sat him down, took his hands, and said, "Quit, I've got us, you just focus on your art." I felt like a Medici, you know, a patron of the arts, and I was. I paid the mortgage on our downtown apartment, the bills, the groceries, his fancy single-origin coffee beans that cost more than my lunch. All of it. I gave him the one thing every artist craves, freedom. In my mind, I wasn't just his girlfriend, I was his biggest investor. And like any good investor, I expected to see some progress. I didn't need him to be a bestseller overnight, but I needed to see the hustle. So yeah, maybe my methods weren't gentle. I'd come home after a brutal 12-hour day, my brain fried from closing a multi-million-dollar deal, and I'd find him staring at the same blank page I'd left him with that morning. And I'd say something. Saved any fictional worlds today, Hemingway. Or when he'd get another rejection email, I wouldn't coddle him. I'd say, well, Tolstoy got rejected too. The difference is, he kept writing until he could afford his own damn estate. I thought it was tough love. A little reality check to keep him from floating away on a cloud of prose. I was trying to motivate him, you know? To light a fire under his ass, it was just our dynamic. I was the pragmatist, he was the artist. It worked. Or at least I thought it did. The thing is, he was always so damn sensitive about his father. It was his tragic backstory, the cornerstone of his entire tortured artist persona. His dad, apparently, had been a painter. According to Isaac, a truly gifted one. He described his childhood apartment in vivid, painful detail. The constant smell of turpentine that failed to mask the scent of damp and poverty, the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. His dad would paint furiously for months, then, after another gallery rejection, would just stop. Isaac's most vivid memory was of his father, a man reeking of cheap whiskey, quietly packing all his canvases and brushes into black trash bags and leaving them on the curb. He never painted again. He got a job as a postal worker and spent the next 30 years marinating in a special kind of bitterness. His father's favorite lecture, delivered at every family gathering, was, "Art is a hobby, son. A nice little distraction before you get a real job that puts food on the table." That line was branded into Isaac's soul. He had this crippling, pathological fear of ending up the same way, a man haunted by his own potential. And I knew all of this. He told me on our third date, his voice thick with a kind of second-hand shame. I remember thinking it was so tragically romantic. But after 5 years, romance fades and patterns emerge. My sympathy started to curdle. I began to see his fear not as a wound, but as a self-fulfilling prophecy he was hiding behind, an excuse for his lack of progress. So, yes, I used it. I'm not proud of it, okay? But when he'd be stuck in a rut for weeks, just moping around the apartment, I'd try to snap him out of it. He'd flinch every time, his shoulders tightening, but I told myself it was necessary. I'd say, "Is this what you want? To be talking about the novel you almost wrote 30 years from now? Don't let what happened to your dad happen to you." Sometimes I'd be even more direct. Another rejection. "Well, are you going to let it break you, or are you going to prove your father wrong?" I thought it was the ultimate motivator. A shock to the system. In my world, you exploit a weakness to create a strength. I was trying to save him from the very fate he was so terrified of. I was being his coach, not his coddler. It was for his own good. It had to be. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just closed the quarter, and my brain was a buzzing hive of spreadsheets and projections. I walked into the apartment, kicked off my heels, and found Isaac vibrating in the middle of the living room. He was practically levitating with an energy I hadn't seen in years. "Sierra. Oh my God, Sierra, you are not going to believe this." He shoved his laptop into my hands. On the screen was an email with the subject line, "Story submission, paper pail." The sender was the Abernathy Review. Even I knew that name. It was one of the prestigious online journals he was always talking about, the ones that were impossible to get into. I scanned the first line. "Dear Mr. Vance, we are delighted to accept your story for publication." He was rambling, pacing back and forth. "They took it, Sierra. They actually took it. After all the rejections, they saw something in it. They saw something in me." He had tears in his eyes. He looked like a little boy who'd just been told that, yes, Santa Claus is real. I was happy for him, honestly. But my brain, my practical, number-crunching brain, immediately went to the bottom line. I scrolled down, past the editor's praise, looking for the details. And there it was. "As per our standard policy, we are pleased to offer a payment of $200 for the story." $200. For 6 months of work, of angst, of him talking my ear off about character motivation. A smile crept onto my face. It wasn't a mean smile, not really. It was just a joke, the perfect joke. It was right there. I looked up at his beaming, tear-streaked face, handed the laptop back, and patted his cheek. "Congratulations, baby, that's amazing." I paused for effect. "So, will that cover our Netflix subscription for the next year?" I laughed. "Hey, it's a start. Your little hobby is finally starting to pay for itself. I'm proud of you." It wasn't a knife. It was a pinprick. But I had, with perfect, surgical precision, aimed it right at the heart of the balloon. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. The light in his eyes didn't just dim, it was extinguished. The smile evaporated. His shoulders slumped, the joy draining out of him like air. He just stood there looking at me, his face completely blank. "Yeah," he said, his voice flat. "A start." He closed the laptop and walked into his office without another word. I stood there in the sudden, heavy silence, telling myself he was just being overly sensitive. He'd get over it. He always did. A few days later, the story went live. The atmosphere in the apartment had been glacial. Isaac was polite, distant. He moved around me like I was a piece of furniture he was trying not to bump into, a ghost in his own home. He didn't mention the story again, and frankly, I was too proud to ask. Then, on Friday morning, my phone buzzed. It was a link from him. No text, just the link. The title of the article was "Paper Pail" by Isaac Vance. I clicked on it, annoyed. Here we go, I thought, his magnum opus. I started reading while my coffee brewed, leaning against the kitchen counter, still in my silk robe. The story was about a painter named Julian. He was talented but struggling, living in a cramped city apartment that smelled of turpentine and regret. His girlfriend, Vera, was a high-powered corporate executive. My stomach gave a little lurch. Vera. It's my middle name. He'd always said he loved it, that it sounded classic, that Serafina was for the world but Vera was just for him. I kept reading, a cold knot tightening in my gut with every sentence. It was all there, thinly veiled and twisted into something monstrous. He described Vera's voice as having the sharp, metallic click of a briefcase latching shut. He wrote about how she'd return from work, and instead of asking about his day, would ask if his paintings had generated any revenue this quarter. He even included a scene where Julian gets his first piece accepted into a small gallery, and Vera's only comment is, "Great. Maybe now you can afford to get that leaky faucet fixed. Every joke, every piece of tough love I had ever dished out was laid bare on the page, stripped of its context and presented as pure, unadulterated cruelty. He even put my Netflix joke in there, almost word for word. I felt my face flush with a mixture of shame and fury. He was twisting everything, making me into this caricature, this dragon lady. But the ending, that's what truly took my breath away. In the story's climax, Julian and Vera have a final, terrible fight. He accuses her of never believing in him, of seeing his soul as nothing more than a bad investment. She laughs, a sound he describes as like shattering glass. She picks up his favorite sketchbook, one he'd been working in for years, and says, "Believe in this. It's just paper, Julian. It's worthless until someone is willing to write a check for it." And then she begins to rip the pages out, one by one, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. The final paragraph was a detached, almost clinical description of Vera's death. It happens a few weeks later. She's hit by a delivery truck while crossing the street, too busy checking stock prices on her phone to look both ways. The narrator describes the scene with a chilling, artistic eye. He doesn't focus on the blood or the violence. He focuses on her body, thrown against the pavement, her expensive suit ruined, her limbs twisted at an unnatural angle. He wrote, and I will never forget this sentence as long as I live. She lay there, crumpled and discarded, like a piece of paper that had been deemed unworthy. Pale and utterly worthless. The coffee maker beeped, a shrill, piercing sound that made me jump. I stood there, phone in my hand, the kitchen filled with the smell of brewing coffee, and I felt a coldness spread through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. He hadn't just written a story. He had written my execution. He had taken my name, my words, my life, and used them to kill me. I stormed out of the kitchen, phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a furious, frantic drumbeat. I was ready for a fight. I was going to scream, to cry, to demand he take that vile thing down. I burst into his office, ready to unleash hell, and I stopped dead. The room was neat, too neat. His desk was clear, save for his old, battered laptop. The overflowing bookshelves had gaps in them where his favorite collections used to be. And by the door, packed and zipped, was the worn leather suitcase I'd bought him for our 3rd anniversary. He was standing by the window, not even looking at me. He turned, and his face was terrifyingly calm. There was no anger, no sadness, just a profound and unsettling emptiness. It was the face of a man who had already left. "Did you like the story?" he asked, his voice even. Like it. You killed me, Isaac. You turned me into a monster, and then you had me run over by a truck. What the hell is wrong with you?" My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. He just nodded slowly, as if I were confirming a hypothesis. "I put all my feelings in there, Sierra," he said, still in that same flat tone. Every word Vera said, every dismissive little joke, every time she made me feel like my soul was nothing more than a failing stock. That was you. I just wrote it all down. He picked up his suitcase. "I just didn't realize until I saw it all on the page. You weren't trying to motivate me. You were tearing out the pages, one by one." He walked towards the door, and I just stood there, frozen. "I can't let you rip out anymore." And that was it. He walked out the front door and closed it softly behind him. No shouting match, no dramatic exit, just a quiet, final click of the lock. For a moment, I stood there, expecting him to come back. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to call him. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried to text him. A single, brutal notification popped up. "Message failed to send." I went to his Instagram, his Facebook. User not found. He hadn't just walked out the door. He had surgically excised himself from my life, leaving behind nothing but that story and a silence that felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. That weekend was a blur of frantic energy and simmering rage. My first instinct was to rally the troops, to get our friends on my side. I started with Maya, my best friend and the one who had introduced us. I called her, my voice a carefully calibrated mix of outrage and heartbreak. "You will not believe what he did," I started, launching into the whole sordid tale of the story, his disappearance, the digital ghosting. I expected gasps, furious condemnations of his cruelty, promises to give him a piece of her mind. Instead, there was just silence. A long, awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Maya," I prompted, my bravado starting to falter. "Wow, Sierra," she finally said, her voice unnaturally neutral. That's a lot. A lot. It's insane, it's psychotic. He needs help." Another pause, this one was even heavier. "Well," she said, drawing the word out, "he was really excited about getting published. He called me right after he got the email. He was just so happy." The unspoken accusation hung in the air between us. "And what did you do?" It was the same with everyone. I called our mutual friend, David, expecting him to join me in mocking Isaac's dramatic exit. But he was evasive. "Dude, I don't know. I don't want to get in the middle of this." When I pushed, he just sighed and said, "Look, Sierra, he's been pretty down for a while. Maybe you both just need some space." No one took my side. No one joined my righteous crusade. They weren't hostile, not exactly. They were just distant, awkward. Their careful neutrality was 1,000 times worse than any direct criticism. It was like they had all been given a script I hadn't seen, a memo that had gone out to everyone but me. The message was clear. They weren't on his side, but they definitely weren't on mine either. For the first time, sitting alone in my pristine, silent apartment, a terrifying thought began to creep in. What if they all thought the story was true? A month has passed. I'm out for drinks with a colleague from work, Catherine. She's nice enough in a bland, corporate way. She's listening patiently as I deliver the polished, witty version of the breakup story for the 10th time. "Honestly, it's a relief," I say, swirling the ice in my gin and tonic. "I need a partner, not a project. Someone who is on my level, you know. Not some sensitive artist who thinks a $200 payment makes him the next Faulkner." Catherine nods sympathetically, murmuring something about how I'm better off. I smile, a brittle, sharp thing. I'm performing, playing the role of the unfazed, powerful woman who's already moving on. But later, when I'm home, the performance ends. The silence of the apartment Isaac and I once shared is a physical weight. I walk into his old office, which is now just a sterile guest room, and I do the thing I promised myself I wouldn't. I open my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark. I navigate to the Abernathy Review, and I read it again. I read paper pale from start to finish, my eyes tracing the words he wrote, the words that killed the woman with my name. I scroll down to the comments section. It's full of praise for his raw honesty, his brutal prose. Someone calls it a heartbreaking portrait of emotional abuse. My fingers tremble as I click back to the story itself. I read the final, awful sentence one more time. She lay there, crumpled and discarded, like a piece of paper that had been deemed unworthy, pale and utterly worthless. A single, hot tear escapes and slides down my cheek, splashing onto the trackpad. I don't wipe it away. I just sit there in the dark, staring at the screen. I can't close the tab. I can't look away. It's a monument to my failure, a testament to how I took the most beautiful thing in my life and with a few careless words tore it into pieces. And I'm the one who has to live in the wreckage.